let's get started with authenticity, right? You hear all the time, even at work, people tell you to be your authentic self. Growing up, you probably heard, just be yourself, girl, don't worry about it. Like, what does that mean to you when you hear people tell you to be your authentic self?
I don't even know where to start, Pabel, because I've been thinking about this conversation, and I think I suffer from, like, there's multiple personality disorder. I feel like I have like multiple culture disorder. So there are so many different like experiences and identities that I can pull from. It depends on who I'm with. I think that you get more of my Dominican side when I'm with, my people, when I'm with Pabel, when I'm with other Dominicans. You get more of, I think, the Bronx girl when I'm with my Bronxites, and when I'm back home, when I'm in the Bronx, which I actually just moved back up here after a long hiatus away. And I also think it's like the age range of the people that you're around. I am on a team where mostly it's older folks. I have some peers among us, but for the most part, I want to say I'm one of the youngest people, but like I'm 32 now, so I'm really like not one of the youngest people anymore. There is one person on my team that's younger than me, but authentic self has always been a tricky one for me, because I think I've also gotten the you sound really white. Where are you really from? You don't sound like a New Yorker. And then I have to kind of rebut that with like, I don't know, man, like this is literally just who I am. And like, I'm not prepared to really answer that question other than like, it depends. It depends on the setting. It depends on the people. It depends on my mood. If I'm going through something, I actually think that sometimes kind of we conflate our authentic self with like really our trauma, and that might not be who we are. So I think your authentic self is really, it requires therapy. It requires working on those things that maybe you think that's who you are, but really it's just something that you need to learn from and kind of evolve from. I think that we fall into thinking that we are versions of who we are, and really that's just like our lower vibrating self, and we want to go higher. And so it's a very complicated question, and I don't think I answered it.
No, you did answer it. I mean, you said so much that I'd love to dive into. I mean, talk to me a little bit
And if I'm
about
talking too much, just cut me off. I
never
go on
talking too
tangents.
much. Never talking too much. Nah, I mean, we got like a whole hour, so I want to get into it. Talk to me about like you saying like a lot of times we are parts of ourselves that we feel like we need to be because of our trauma. Like, what do you mean by that?
Um, what I mean by that is like, I think we fall into the trap of, this is who I am. And really that's not who you are. I think that that's what life has conditioned you to become. But that really who you are, the essence of who you are, might be buried by experiences that kind of leave that residue on you, that make you second guess yourself, that make you question yourself, that make you not as confident as you should be in that authenticity. I was thinking about a conversation that I had with my roommate. Her brother, who I saw as a baby grow up, didn't really see him the last 10 years of his life, but he grew up to be this like really well-meaning. He's an EMT. He's super smart, but he's a fuckboy. He has a wild streak. And I said to her, I saw that in his personality when he was like one. I saw that he was like a little bit of a wild child. And
At
she said,
one?
yeah, you can tell. And this is what my roommate said to me. You can tell a person's essence really early on. Like you never lose that essence of who you are. And so
He
my
was
roommate and
like
I, yeah,
you. People started carrying him, and then he just started grabbing titties. Like, what did he do at
he had a
one?
crush
Like,
on me. He loved women. So even as like a little toddler, he loved women. He's also Dominican. You know how
oh
Dominicans love
god,
women. So,
oh god.
so he had a little crush on me. He used to follow me around. And so him growing up to be like this, like kind of a romantic, but also just kind of a firecracker of a personality. I saw that when he was a kid. And so, for her to say, well, you never really lose your essence as a person, I thought that was very interesting, because if I think of my essence, I think my essence is that I'm goofy. I like to laugh. I like to make other people laugh. But looking at who I am now, I think that you don't always get that version of me anymore. And that you get it less so at work. I feel like you don't see that goofy person person until you really get to know me on a personal level. My colleagues don't really see that version of me. You definitely have. But it really doesn't show up in those formal settings. And I don't really know what to make of that. I think part of it is maybe I don't see being goofy as professional. And I think that there is a time and place for everything. But I have noticed, I've been at Facebook for 3 years, and I think that kind of reserved approach that I had before, I don't necessarily have it now. And I do kind of feel myself reaching the level of fuck it. This is just who I am. This is how I'm going to be. And so I think you're starting to see a little bit more of that creep up. And I think it just goes to show it's all about level of comfortability, at least for me.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. It's so interesting too. I mean, like authenticity comes in so many different forms, and it's interesting too because most people think about it from like what they see, right? As far as like how they dress up or how they do their hair or their makeup, etc. But it's so interesting that your mind went to automatically like, no, my authenticity is also my personality, how I act as well. And you mentioned being goofy, and you like not being comfortable showing that side of yourself in a work setting because it may not be professional. I'm wondering, like, have you always been comfortable being goofy, or was at some point were people telling you like, muchacha, no haga eso, you know, en la calle, blah, blah, like, I don't know. Yeah. Was that always encouraged, or like, did you get some of that feedback before early on, or was it when you got to corporate America where you were like, ooh, I should probably like not be this way?
I think I learned early on that I needed to adapt to the setting. So I think given that I grew up in the Bronx, I went to elementary school in Washington Heights, I went to high school in Lower Manhattan and Lincoln Center, I went to college in Riverdale. So all of these different places have like a different flavor. And I think, as I said, I learned early on that like, depending on where I am, I need to kind of be a chameleon. And so even growing up, I found like I didn't have a set group that I was with. I would usually kind of filter in and out of different social circles. And I felt myself not necessarily like faking it, because I did have those aspects within me, but surfacing that. So surfacing the Dominican when I'm around Dominicans, surfacing the artist, you know, like emo kid when I'm around other artists, emo kids. I think it's all in my wheelhouse, just like professionalism. You know, that's also in my wheelhouse. But I feel like I don't think it's possible for me to show all of those things at once. Like, I think it would seem kind of crazy if I like showed all of those things at once. But yeah, I just think that I gauge the situation. I walk into every situation like, how much can I really show you?
That's so interesting. I mean, it makes sense though, right? Because like you're going into a certain situation, and a lot of us, the goal is to just be accepted, right? I mean, even from like a biological standpoint, like we're made to be part of groups, right? I'm so curious if you're like with your artist emo kids, and then you're like, yo, I'm gonna go dance tonight, and they're like, girl, what? Like, I wonder like what would be like that situation, and why you don't think they can like coexist.
The acceptance thing has been a huge issue for me. And I think the fact that like I have found myself floating in different social circles speaks to that, because I want to be friends with everyone. And I want to get along with everyone. I'm sorry, your original question was?
No, it wasn't even a question. It was just like a thought, like, you know, like what would happen if you were to actually like, not come out, but in a sense, like, because the way that I'm hearing it is like, yeah, like you're a chameleon, but at the same time, you're kind of not showing each of these groups who you really are. Like you're showing like one side of yourself to each of these groups in a way. You know what I mean? Like what would happen if you went into your like artist emo friends and you told them that you were going to go out dancing?
I pulled out the wrong person. Hold on.
Yeah.
I've never done that. I mean, that's very interesting. Like, what if I walked into my team meeting with my Dominican game face on? They might be really startled by that. I don't think they're prepared for that. So,
wait, have you ever done that, or are you so trained at this
Dominican
point
on a work call? No.
well, not even on a work call, but I'm saying like you said, like, oh shit, I brought in the wrong person. Or are you so trained at this point where you're just like, I got it. I know that, like, I know when to bring this person
Yeah,
out, when to bring this
absolutely. I've
person
been
out.
like, I mean, I've been doing this since elementary school. So when I went to
Elementary
elementary school, I
school.
mentioned, yeah, I went to
Interesting.
school in Washington Heights, but I grew up in the Bronx. So I wasn't like my peers who went to school and lived in the Heights. And they were like what I would describe as like quintessential Dominican, some fresh off the boat, like still very connected to the homeland and to that culture. And you would think that I would be too, because I am first generation. My mom was born in DR. I was born here, but she put a precedent on making sure that I assimilated, making sure that I spoke English, that I did well at school. Spanish was my first language, but I forgot it pretty immediately once I started school. And my mom would do the, trying to talk in Spanish at home, but she was never strict about that kind of stuff. Not the way that I've seen in other Dominican households. And I will say, I feel like that did put me at a little bit of a disadvantage. It was an advantage in other ways, but a disadvantage in that I felt a disconnect from my peers in elementary school. And they wouldn't so much as make fun of me. I never had that kind of relationship. I got along very well with other kids at school, but they would always be like, you say that funny. Like you say chancla instead of chancleta, or, you
Oh
sound
God, yeah.
more Puerto Rican to me, or you look Puerto Rican. I don't know. And that never really bothered me, but I was like, no, I mean, I say it this way, I guess, because I live in the Bronx and I do live around Puerto Ricans. Where I lived, there weren't many other Dominicans. There was one other Dominican family. So it was primarily Puerto Rican or Italian, Black or Indian. So I had a bit of a melting pot where I was, but I didn't have like a little Dominican Republic like my peers had living in the Heights. So I saw that stark difference there. And it kind of just evolved from that. So like when I went to high school, I didn't go to a high school, in the Bronx or in the Heights. I went downtown. I was really around mostly white students, although again, it was a melting pot as New York is. But I think that led me further down the path of you're very white sounding, or you're very you've assimilated to the point where, are you really Dominican? Have you forgotten about your background, and are you ashamed? And I can say, no, I'm not. I am so proud to be Dominican, even though I don't have a lot of the cultural context that maybe my peers do. But I still feel it so fervently that you can't tell me anything different. Even if I don't, know the latest merengue, or even if my Spanish is kind of terrible, to be honest with you, I still feel very
It's
Dominican.
okay.
I'm not gonna let other people make me feel otherwise. But I think in that lifetime of adjusting, depending on the audience, that's just kind of how I handle myself. And so that means that I'm turning off certain valves as I'm turning on other ones. And I think after a while, after enough years, then more of those valves start to get turned on at the same time.
Yeah, that's such an interesting insight you mentioned as well, around like the first time when you started bringing out all of these personalities or even people was in elementary school. Like that's so young
Mm-hmm.
for us to start just like faking it. And it's
Already people are
crazy.
trying to put you in boxes.
And it's crazy too, because in that scenario, I say this all the time, but like work is such an easy situation to point to and say like, look, I'm not being myself because we're surrounded by people that don't look like us. But if you think about it, like you said, like that shit started way back in the day, even in our own communities. Like
Mm-hmm.
even in our own communities, we're trying to be like, no, I am like whatever box that is. Yo, and I definitely feel you on the Spanish. Like my Spanish is good. Like it was my first language as well. Shout out to Abuela for teaching me. But yeah, whenever I go to my barber, I don't know what the fuck he's saying at
You're
all.
fast.
Yo, at all. But I'll tell you one thing though, he puts me on to all the new music. My Shazam be on that shit the whole time.
Siri,
Uh,
what's the song?
yo, facts. But nah, I mean that's really interesting. And what about like you said, when you went to high school, that was the first time where like were you considered like a minority in that high school, as far as like you said that it was a lot more of a melting pot compared to like your earlier years?
Mm-hmm. It seemed, when I think back to it, it seemed super diverse. I'm sure that there were predominantly white people, but maybe it's because of like the crowds that I was running in that I got exposure to all of the other kinds of people that were there. But it was really like even more so than living in the Bronx, because I think you had a lot of different minorities. But then I went to LaGuardia High School of the Arts and Performing Arts. And so you're bringing students from every borough. I think that's what's so cool about that high school. Usually your high schools are zoned. So you are going to a school that's nearby, where all of the other students that live nearby are going, versus this school, you can be from any borough and attend that school. So not only are you getting different ethnicities, but you're getting different boroughs, which also have their own kind of feel and vibe to them. So that exposure was incredible. And I think that it got me less feeling of like, I'm a Dominican. And that's really when I was like, I'm a New Yorker. And that's when New York pride really stepped to the forefront of like my identity and what I really like see myself as. I'm definitely Dominican, but I think at the end of the day, I'm a New Yorker.
Okay. I fuck with that. I like that. I mean, I am as well. I mean, I've gone through phases with my Dominicanness, but yeah, it's one of those things where like I also feel very Dominican, but if I'm around certain groups, they're like, man, you ain't Dominican, you ain't real, because like you wasn't born there, etc. So that's really interesting. And I could definitely relate. Talk to me about, fast forward to where you are now. I know we skipped a few things, but corporate America, right? And this is, I'd say it's not a melting pot, where in your first, earlier years, I think it was a bit of a melting pot, even in high school, where it's like all these different boroughs and cultures, et cetera. What is it like with all these personalities in corporate America? Like, which one do you bring out? Is there like a specific one that you use when you go to work?
I think the specific personality that you see the most at work is probably like, I think that's the essence that I was talking about earlier. And that I feel like my essence is always, I think I start from, I at least like to think that I start from a place of kindness, that I start from a place of care and wanting people to feel safe around me. And not only feel safe, but supported. And I think it makes so much sense that I became an an executive assistant.
Ow.
I started off as an administrative assistant. But I come from a place of knowing what it feels like to not feel safe, to not feel cared for, to not feel comfortable. And I never want anyone to feel that way around me. So that's
and
kind of it. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Talk to me about that. Like, what instances are you referring to when you didn't feel safe or supported?
I think, just people can be cruel. Like life is a journey. And I also think that people can be cruel without meaning to. And that, your words hold a lot of weight. And I think that sometimes when you say things off the cuff, you don't realize that that could stick with the person for 5, 10 years, their whole life even. So I think there are things that just in conversations with people, really about identity, about mistakes that I have made along the way. I think, when people say things to you that really stick with you and maybe cause you to fixate on that, can be difficult. So I know that in my older life, me as a grown up, like I've really struggled with feelings of depression, feelings of wondering like, was this the right path? Am I kind of satisfying like why I was put on this earth? And I used to be a teacher. That was my first job into the adult world, and that was really hard. I did that for 4 years, and my school eventually got shut down. I worked at a Catholic school. A lot of Catholic schools got closed that year. And I will say I was in the poorest district in the South Bronx. And it really scarred me. I had a principal who was a nun, woman of God, but that stereotypical kind of like mean-spirited, maybe even a little bit racist Irish Catholic.
Oh, I went to Catholic schools my entire life.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
So the archetype. And so I had to work for someone like that for 4 years. And after that was over and I found an entry-level position as an administrative assistant, I thought, well, this is a good time to just like rest for a second and decide what the next step is. Because teaching is like the hardest thing that you could do. And so I just wanted a break. As I moved to different companies and the roles kind of got more complex, I realized like, no, this is actually something that I can like build out and really like make my own and make it meaningful, even if it didn't feel that way initially. It really did feel like just pushing papers initially, which I struggled with a lot because I was doing something so important previously. So that's why, now at Facebook, I don't just do my day job. I do passion projects. I do things that matter to me. I do things that move the needle on diversity and inclusion. I do things that I think will make a difference, because I think I also went into the job market wanting to make a difference. That's why I became a teacher. So losing that and having to pivot kicked off depression for me. And so I would say getting to Facebook is where I really realized, like, you don't need to be depressed. Your life, it took a turn. You're on a different page and you're going to make it work for yourself. And I know that I've taken you very far away from like what we were initially talking about, but I thought it was important to like give you that background of how I kind of ended up where I am now.
No, this is super important, and it's something that like we don't talk about in our community as well. I mean, I get depressed here and there. I think the biggest thing for me is I have suffered from anxiety, and it's like, I mean, I think it's bad, but and I go to therapy, I mean, every week just to talk about it, and it honestly like saved my life. But it's funny, like when I told like certain family members, like I started going to therapy, they was like, "You good?" And like all of those type of things, like they were just like very worried, and there's such a stigma around that. But like, did you experience that as well?
I think the reason that I brought that up, because I was like, why did I bring this up? The reason that I brought that up was going back to those little things that people say, right, that stick with you over the years. And I think even as early as things that were said to me in my family, things that were said to me by peers in elementary school, things that were said to me when I first became an admin, going back to the family thing, the things that were said to me were related to like, oh, you sure you want that second plate of food? I was kind of a chubby kid. So having to undo the work of my relationship with food, because as a Dominican, like you load up that plate, you have a better rice, you have like all this, protein, chicken, whatever. And I had a really unhealthy relationship with food. So just the little things that family members say to kind of police that. Or as I said to you in elementary school, like having kids question the way I talked, or really not the way I dressed because we had uniforms, but having kids question the way I talked, and having to work through the issues that arose because of that. And then becoming an administrative assistant, having people say, well, what's next? Like, you can do better than this. And, really kind of looking at it as very kind of beneath me, which was tough. And so that's kind of why I think all of those little things and having that culminate on your spirit is why I think that therapy is so important. And I'll be the first to say that I was vehemently against therapy. I never wanted to do it. I was like, what is another person going to tell me? Like, you're just another person. It's the same reason that I am not like, I don't fangirl over people. I think celebrities, again, just another person, there's no reason to like idolize and exalt them. Although there are people that, that I think that we should kind of recognize and venerate. But
Romeo, little Bad Bunny,
Yes,
I ran after his bus, but
Did you really?
No.
I was tempted. But yeah, I think that what I'm so grateful about this pandemic is that I think it caused everyone to stop the facade, to stop like the distraction, to stop the bullshit and be like, wait, we're not okay. And we should like really address that and stop distracting ourselves. And I think that this is the first year where not only are people willing to seek therapy, but we're willing to talk about our feelings. Yeah. I haven't spoken about my feelings so much at work ever. And I kind of love it. Because this idea of you got to keep that shit at the door. And, when you get to work, you got to put on your game face. Yes, to a certain degree, absolutely. You got to lock that shit up and get ready for this meeting. Yes. But I love that now we're holding space for just check-ins, for seeing how people are, for recognizing that we're not machines, and that like you are always going to bring that shit with you. Even if you say, no, we're leaving it at the door. Impossible. Impossible.
I
So,
completely agree. I mean, during COVID for me, you know, my manager would ask me how I'm doing, and I would lie so often. Because again, it's your manager. You don't want them to, at the end of the day, your manager is supposed to grade your performance, right? And at the end of the day, like, I need to deliver a certain amount of revenue or reports or whatever it is, right? And I felt so strange saying that I'm mentally exhausted. I am not doing well for like a bunch of different reasons. But yo, as soon as I told her that, she was like, yeah, I know. I could tell. Like, that's why I've been asking you so many damn times. You know what I mean? But it just opened up such a great conversation around like, okay, we recognize it. Like, how can we get you to a place where you are your best self? And yo, during COVID was the first time I ever took a mental health day. I was like, what the fuck is a mental health day? And it's something that's available to all employees, but I feel like, again, I don't know the numbers, but I would guess that people of color don't take them as often. When I took my days off and I extended it into a few PTO days, I told some friends of color that work at Facebook, and they were like, "What? That's a benefit?" So it's so important, yeah. And being that vulnerable and being open, is helpful for you, but it's also helpful for other people that learn from you that, you know, it's okay to be like that, and there is a way to get better.
Just having the dialogue about it, just talking about it. I think hearing other people talk about therapy this year is what really got me thinking like, okay, you really have nothing to lose. And we do have that great mental health benefit. I actually got my therapist through Lyra.
Shout out to
Lyra. I met with her yesterday, and I actually tried this last year, but I didn't get the search result that I wanted. I really wanted a woman of color. And I got mostly older white men and women. And so that was a little bit discouraging, and I didn't follow through with that. But then I tried again this year, and I found this amazing woman. I've been seeing her for about 5 months at this point. Basically, as soon as like quarantine kicked off, I was in a studio apartment. I think you remember I moved to be right next to the office. And I was thinking, well, I'm just, I'm going to be exploring Gramercy, and I'm just going to sleep here. And then
same thing with Harlem.
Yeah. And then quarantine hit, and then I was stuck in this little like solitary confinement prison, and I knew like I was going to lose my shit if I didn't speak to somebody.
Talk to me about the search for a therapist of color and why that was important for you.
So I think that I knew instinctively that that's what I needed, and I couldn't really verbalize like, why I really wanted to speak to someone that looked like me. I think I inherently knew why that was important. But now in talking to her and having this person who is my therapist, who is a woman of color, now I understand why I held out for that. And to walk you through the process with Lyra, you answer a questionnaire, and then they give you a list of about, I think it was like 5 to 10 people to choose from. And so last year I didn't love the list. And now I could have gone a little bit further. So they actually have a hotline where if you don't like the results you get, they can help you find someone else. But I think like I was only just a little bit ready to do it. I wasn't fully bought in yet. And it probably was better that I didn't do it until I really like submitted myself to the process. So this year I answered that questionnaire again. Last year, there was a piece of what is the most pressing issue for you? And it gave like issues with relationships, depression, anxiety, so on and so forth. And so last year I picked depression. This year I picked anxiety. And it gave me a different set of people. And I saw this woman who appeared to be a woman of color. And so in our first couple of sessions, I thought like, oh my God, I can make references and she knows what I'm talking about. Whereas like, I don't think I would have gotten that with a white therapist. So talking about like, what's that TV show with, oh my goodness. I love this TV show and I'm blanking. It's on HBO with.
Insecure?
Yeah, thank you. You're like, Yeah. So I was referencing Insecure. and she knew exactly what I was talking about. She had seen the episode too. She was watching it. So I think there's a certain level of being able to like identify with who you're talking to and them knowing where you're coming from, like not just reading about it, not just studying up on it, but like having lived it. And so that's why I think it's important that your therapist looks like you.
That totally makes sense. I mean, how do you think that translate into like an environment like work? Because you do so much at work, even beyond your jobs, particularly in the ERG space. And I can't tell you, I mean, you probably go through this too, right? Like you're at work pre-COVID, you're walking down the hallway and let's say I see you in the hallway and like, we don't know each other. I'm like, oh my God, there's another one of us. You know what I mean? And that just excitement to be like, oh my God, I'm not alone. Eventually I'm going to talk to her and we're going to be best friends and like, we're going to relate to each other on so many different levels. But you do a lot of that community building. And I'm so grateful for that because I remember my first year at Facebook, I was having a really difficult time because I didn't see people that looked like me. And I felt like I was alone in what I was going through and just feeling misunderstood, et cetera. But it wasn't for those if it wasn't for those employee resource groups like Black at and Latin at, where I could have a safe space to talk to people and like feel heard, feel related. Like I don't think I would have made it. So like, yeah, talk to me a little bit about some of that work that you do. Thank you.
Definitely would have made it.
Thank you.
I don't know. It's something that brings me joy. Like I think that being an executive assistant, I'm going to be real with you. It can be a little mindless. It's not rocket science. It's very detail oriented, but it's a lot of clicking and like, and you probably have aspects of your job that are like that too, where it's
everybody's job.
You're on autopilot and you're just like banging stuff out, but it doesn't really like, it doesn't speak to that like passion that's inside of you. And so, I know that like employee resource groups, to the point that you just brought up, are important just to like bring people into the fold and make sure that the talented people of color that we're hiring feel comfortable and that they stay. I know that it's important in that aspect, but selfishly, it is so that I can meet you guys. It is so that I can like figure out who's who, and it puts me right at the center of that. And also being an admin, a lot of us are minorities. There's a good chunk of white women as well. But I found in the New York office that most of my colleagues were also women of color. Whereas I feel like maybe for someone like you might end up on a team that's 100% white, right? And my immediate teams, I support 3 directors. Those teams, 2 of them are pretty diverse. One of them is pretty homogenous. The main team that I support is pretty homogenous. Mostly white women. I love them all though. They're so, they do the homework and they are allies. So I'm lucky in that sense. But in terms of the admin community in New York, I found the Latinas and the Black girls and the Asian girls really quickly. And so we would sit upstairs on 19, right? I'm like, which floor?
Yeah. That healthy floor.
The healthy floor. We would sit up there and get some sunlight and bitch and
bitch.
Oh my goodness, those bitch sessions. Like I left those lunches feeling like I was ready to complete the afternoon. And it's very, very cathartic to have those conversations. But yes, I do it for you guys, but I also do it for myself. And the way that I got involved was through Latinat Summit. So my first week at the company, about a week later, there was going to be a summit, and I didn't think my bosses were going to let me go back to MPK. I had just come from orientation, and I was like, this thing is happening, and like, I would really love to do it, and I'll make sure I work at night, and I'll complete everything I need to do. I'll put in extra hours, but if I could please attend. And there was no pushback whatsoever. And so they let me go, and it was just a phenomenal way to like start your employment at Facebook. And so I got back to New York like, I need to be a part of this. I want to be part of the leadership team, and I want to see what I can do on Latinat. And so I've been doing it for 3 years now. I will tell you, I am stepping down. I'm focusing on building a Latin circle. So getting a little bit more nuanced in who I'm supporting. And I think that really, that community is important to me. And that's kind of where I'm pivoting to.
That's beautiful. I mean, thank you so much for that work. And can you talk a little bit about that event, like when you walked into it and you looked around? I mean, all right, for me, for example, like when I went well, my first year Latin Community Summit wasn't a thing. Only Black at Community Summit was a thing. So I just remember walking to Black at though, and I looked around. I was like, there's people dancing on stage. I'm like, these motherfuckers got rhythm. I'm like, this shit different. Yo, I was like, yo, this shit is dope. But automatically I was like, because I got the personalities too, right? I got my professional dude. I got the other shit. But that was the first time for me where I was like, wow, I could be myself. And I felt really comfortable and safe. And same thing when I went to Latin Community Summit, I just felt like, oh shit, like I could be myself. You know what I mean? What was that feeling like for you?
So much pride. I mean, you walk in there and you realize like, these are the best and brightest, and they made it to Facebook, and everyone, I'm sure they have a very different journey about how they got there, but ultimately it's a story of triumph, I think, for all of us. And it's, I don't know, like you can't walk into that setting and not just be like happy, smiling from ear to ear. And you connect with people that literally you've known for like a second, and you're like, no, you're my best friend now. Like I saw a girl wearing the same shirt as me. I had on my Latina shirt because I really love my graphic gear, as you can tell. I had on my Latina shirt, and I saw someone wearing the same exact shirt. I'm gonna send you this picture afterwards, but we saw each other. We're like,
and it's like you've known each other your whole life.
Yes, and now, I mean, who knows if we're ever gonna have another in-person summit, but ever since then, every time we see each other, and she's over on the West Coast, so I only ever see her then, and sometimes we'll ping and stuff. But now I have friends on the West Coast that I wouldn't have had otherwise. But you feel the power, you feel like the intelligence just beaming in the room. And then also like the special guests are pretty cool too. Who did we have that year? Oh my goodness.
Amara La Negra, was it?
No. The year
it?
prior to that, she was the president of Univision, I believe.
Nelly Galan?
Yes, thank you. Nelly Galan. Yeah.
I still have her book, Fire book.
Me too. Yep. I got it signed and everything.
She was dropping some gems. She was like, ladies buy house. What is it? Ladies buy buildings, not shoes. I was like, okay.
Yes. Buy property, not Louis Vuittons.
Yeah.
And her story, like, you remember that. She also went to a Catholic school, just like me. She went to a Catholic school, and she defied, I guess she wrote an article or something. I forget what the exact piece it is that she wrote, but Catholic school, there are rules and you got to follow them. And she dared not to do that, which as a Catholic, but then also as like a Latino, you're not supposed to, you have to follow your elders. And when you're at school, you need to like follow those rules to a T. And she didn't do that. And not only did she not do that, she moved away from home versus staying around, for college. She moved far away, and I don't know. I mean, she's really a story of, I think, being an independent woman and not really falling into that subservient kind of like trap that awaits some of us.
Yeah. Nah, it's a really dope story. If you haven't read the book, I definitely recommend it. And I know we're running out of time, so I have two questions. The first one, I'm not really sure how to phrase. It's like, what do you think about close friends groups on Instagram?
I'm so glad you asked me this, and I know why you asked me this. So some people know this, most don't. You know this because you're one of my special close followers who is also a colleague. So for everyone watching and listening out there, I told Cabell that I use close friends to really post my more not safe for work content. I'm a wild child in some respects. As I told you earlier, that doesn't always come out. It depends on who I'm with. It depends on the setting. But that essence of being that lighthearted, humorous, kind of just speaking from the heart and maybe not like filtering myself person, like she is in there. And I know that, as I said, it's not safe for work. And I don't think it's something that all of my colleagues will understand. I think that you are someone that I trust. And so my close friends is everyone except for my coworkers. So if you see that feed, if you see the little green circle popping up, I'm twerking at a bar. I'm I'm rapping some vulgar shit. I'm, just being a goofball, just being super silly, being sexy. Those are things that like I don't really feel comfortable with my boss seeing. And we all follow each other on Instagram and Facebook. That's just kind of the culture of where we work. And I think if we worked at a different place, I wouldn't have to like do this kind of thing. But if I get a friend's request, I'm not going to deny it from like a coworker. I'm not going to deny it. I'm going to add you, but I'm going to put guardrails in place so that I don't then need to censor my content, because I don't want anyone coming to me on Monday like, hey, looks like you had a interesting Saturday. The things that I want everyone to see, that if there's a message that I want even my coworkers to see, that's going to get posted on my regular stories. And then my close friends, like that's a glimpse into like who Sasha really is.
It's so interesting too, because like obviously like we're all part of close friends groups for a lot of people, right? And there's some times where like people post things on close friends groups. I'm like, that's not even a bad picture. Like,
right.
But it's always so interesting what people like decide what to show and not show certain people. And that's really interesting. But is it more so because you just don't want to explain it to people? Like, oh my God, what was that WAP dance that you were doing?
I do feel like certain people wouldn't get it. And no, I don't want to explain it. And I don't want to be judged. But, then maybe I'm not being my authentic self, Pavel. Because like, I feel like being your authentic self is like not caring about those opinions or allowing those standards to kind of alter the way that you show up in the world. And so maybe like the next step into getting closer to my authentic self is getting rid of close friends and just like, living my truth. I'll have to think about that.
Hey, but, I'm not trying to encourage you to, DM your boss a tip drill video or anything, but not. I mean, it's really interesting, and I'm not here to like tell people to do certain things. I just want to have a conversation and just like talk through it. But no, it's so interesting, and it's not just you. Like I follow other people that like. For example, like I have one friend that in the close friends group, it's a picture of like him and his wife just kissing, and I'm just like, it wasn't even like a makeout session, just like a kiss and like a beautiful background. But for some people, that is just like too much. So everyone has like their own sort of thing. For me, it's a completely different. Like, well, I don't have close friends, but I sometimes think about like not only are my coworkers following me, but I have clients that are following me, and I sometimes think about like,
you need an Insta.
If I post this video, are they aligned with my political views, my social views? Are they aligned with any of those things? And like I just post it at this point, but I'm not gonna lie, like I feel super uncomfortable most of the time.
I think that's the issue though with like, I say intimate, but I don't mean that in like a romantic way. I think that just some things are just more personal. And I think that the pieces that you give of yourself, I don't think you're going to give the same amount of yourself to everyone, and you shouldn't. I think there are some parts of you that should be sacred to like either your significant other or to your close friends circle or to your family. And so there are levels to this shit. And I don't think that there is a problem with you showing up in different ways with different people. I've always felt like, does that mean that I haven't figured out who I am? And I actually, in having this conversation with you, I don't think that's the case. I just think that who I am is so much.
Yeah.
It's so many things.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I mean, I think the beautiful part about your story is that, you started at this point where at a very early age, you saw that you were sort of like having all these personalities and not being your authentic self. And I think you've been like unlayering some of those parts that you were hiding to different people, the more comfortable that you got. And for people, it's not just like a today I'm letting it all out. You know what I mean? Like when I'm listening to your story, it sounds like, it's a continuous journey. And like, I still fake it all the time. you know, there are times where like people ask me what I did this weekend, and like early on I was like, what I really did was like, yo, I was like editing podcast video all weekend, but I didn't want people to be like, oh, Pabel, haha, he's working on that Latino thing, you know? So like sometimes I just be like, I didn't do anything. I just did Netflix. So I have to build up the courage to, or like I want to build up the courage. I don't have to. My therapist would make fun of me if I said that. I want to build up the courage to say some of those things, but it's a continuous journey. Like we're all going through it. We're all learning. Um,
I
Last
think we need to
question.
understand, I'm sorry,
Oh, no,
can I
no, go
just
for it. Go
quickly
for it.
say, I think
Yeah.
that we need to understand like who our authentic self is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that brings me back to like the initial point that I was trying to drive, that like who you think you are may be who you have been conditioned to be. And
Yeah.
so before you really try to figure out what you want to present to the world, you need to be introspective. And part of that is therapy. Part of that is
Yeah.
going through everything that you've been through from the start until now and understanding how that's shaped you and how that has caused you to hide in certain aspects and how you can really bring that essence back out.
Yeah, I totally agree. And last question, you may have answered this already, but just checking to see if anything else comes up. What is one thing for you that as you continue to move forward, that really just empowers and inspires you to bring your essence, as you called it, or just your authentic self, you know, wherever you are?
I think, you know how we talk about like old people and like when you get to a certain age, you just don't give a fuck. Like you just say whatever. And like, it's almost like you're going back full circle to your toddler days where you just kind of like blurted out stuff without thinking. Um, I think that you are your most authentic self when you're a toddler and when you're like an old man. And it's getting to that point of like taking what people say, saying noted, thinking about like don't close yourself off to criticism, right? Like I think that we all have room for growth, and if people want to tell us about ourselves, it may be helpful to listen, to take in that perspective, but then always come back to who am I at the end of the day? Who am I when I go to sleep at night? What are the things that matter to me? What makes me tick? And what kind of work do I need to do internally to make sure that that person is always showing up, and not the trauma, and not, you know, the negative experiences or the things that have been said to you that you ended up believing. You got to kind of filter through that noise, I think, and that's how you get to you.